I guess we can. You want to just go around and say where you're from and your name?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm so happy to be back on transportation again. And Karen Tyson, the 12th Senate District.
Thank you, Chairman. Mike Argerbright, District 17.
Joe Clays, Senate 27.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Elaine Bauer, Senate District 36, and your only car dealer on the committee. I'm happy to be back.
Good morning, everyone. Rick Cluse, District 3.
Mike Peterson, Senate District 28, South Wichita.
Ethan Corson, Senate District 7 in Northeast Johnson County.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Chair, happy to be back on transportation again. Brenda Dietrich, Senate District 20, Southwest Shawnee County and Olive Benzie County.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Glad to be returning to Transportation Committee. I'm Kelly Warren and honored to represent Senate District 11, which is southeastern Johnson County. Thank you.
Jeff Klemp, Senate District 5, Wyandotte County, Leavenworth County, Leavenworth, Lansing, and Piper and Basehor.
Perfect timing, Senator Schmidt. Just introduce yourself and where you're from.
Senator Patrick Schmidt, representing Shawnee and Douglas County.
Excellent. If we could have staff, starting with Florence Dieter.
Walt Nelson with the KLRD from St. Mary's, Kansas.
Jill Shelley, Legislative Research.
Adam Siebers with the Revisor's Office.
Brennan Richmond, Broadcasting.
Thank you, guys. The staff's good to get to know. They'll be your best friends here before too long. Committee, first up today, we have some bill introductions. Anybody on the committee have a bill introduction? Senator Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you recall, last year we had a bill from the land surveyors. They have another bill this year they'd like to discuss, and it's extending a filing deadline from 30 days to 90 days. And it is RS 0102.
Are there any objections to this bill being introduced? Seeing none, it will be introduced. Any further introductions from the committee? I know in the audience, I believe Travis Lowe had requested a bill introduction. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Travis Lowe from the Braden, Heidner, Lowe & Associates firm, here representing AAA Kansas. On behalf of AAA, we respectfully introduce the introduction of a bill pertaining to moving over for stranded disabled vehicles on the side of highways. It is RS 25 RS 0219. It is on file with the Revisor Siebers.
Any questions on this bill? Any objections? It'll be introduced. Are there any other bills from the audience? Seeing none, we'll move on to our presentation from the Highway Patrol. We have Merle Rydell to start us off.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Merle Riedel. I am the Executive Officer for the Kansas Highway Patrol. We should have some slides to pull up shortly. So I just want to thank the committee for giving the Highway Patrol an opportunity to speak to you today about our current operations and some other initiatives that the Highway Patrol is exploring. Colonel Smith, the superintendent of the Highway Patrol, does send his regards. He is at a Fallen Heroes Resiliency event in Wichita today and was unable to attend. But also joining me today is Lieutenant Colonel John Linhair, the assistant superintendent for the Highway Patrol, Sherry Mackey, deputy secretary for business operations from the Highway Patrol, and Major Johnny Ingram, executive commander for the Field Operations South Bureau. So there may be an instance where I have to phone a friend, so I just wanted to kind of set that up a little bit. Moving on to the next slide, you'll see a slide with several regions depicted on it. That's a graphic that represents the Kansas Highway Patrol as you might typically think about our organizations. Troopers conducting typical traffic and highway enforcements are divided into 8 regional troops. They are what we refer to as road troopers. And if you look on that map, you'll see in the top right, beginning in Troop A in Kansas City. If we move kind of counterclockwise, we've got Troop B in Topeka, Troop C in Salina, Troop D in Hayes, Troop E in Garden City, Troop F in Wichita, and Troop 8 in Chanute. The one road troop that you don't see depicted there is Troop G, which provides law enforcement on the Kansas Turnpike. Each of those troops is further divided into zones, and you can see those graphics there, the shaded areas. Those are zones, and current staffing levels permit 1 to 2 troopers per zone, which is not optimal. In a more perfect world, we would have additional resources and staffing to cover and provide more troops per zone. For in Troop D, for example, in Northwest Kansas, you can see 2 troopers may be covering an 8-county zone. And that can be challenging to provide 24-hour coverage, particularly when we are experiencing staffage shortages. Moving on to the next slide, please. The Highway Patrol did recently reorganize to better align units with similar functions under the same leadership. You can see an organizational chart that gives you a snapshot of what we currently look like. So units under the direct supervision of the superintendent include administrative services. That's got aspects such as fiscal operations, vehicle fleet operations, human resources, and IT. And then we have protective services, which does include the Capitol Police and a few other elements that we'll talk about shortly. Also directly under the superintendent is the professional standards units, which investigates allegations of misconduct among agency employees and monitors compliance with professional standards regarding aspects such as investigations and other procedures. Units under the direct supervision of the superintendent include the Field Operations North and South Bureaus that include those 8 regional troops that we just looked at. In addition to those road troops, we have a variety of specialized troops. So we have Special Operations Bureau that includes Troop J, which is the training academy, Troop S, which is the special response teams, hazardous device units, and Troop T, which is the aircraft unit. Under the Technical Operations Bureau, we have the Troop I Motor Carrier Inspection Program, Troop M Communications and Dispatch Services, and Public and Governmental Affairs. Under the Investigative Operations Bureau, we have Troop N, which is Criminal Interdiction and Drug Enforcement, Troop O, Felony Investigation Unit, and Troop V, or the VIN, or Motor Vehicle Theft Unit. Moving on to the next slide. I'm not going to go through every one of those programs in detail, but I just want to highlight a few that were part of that reorganization. I mentioned earlier the Protective Services Bureau. KHP consolidated several functions under a new Protective Services Bureau that included the Capitol Police, Executive Protection Unit, and Homeland Security. These units previously existed but fell under multiple commands. The reorganization consolidated these functions under one bureau, which allowed for greater emphasis on protective services, which is a growing concern. Next slide, please. So some of the elements under the protective services is the Capitol Police, pursuant to KSA 754503. The Capitol Police provides safety and security for visitors and state employees on the Capitol Complex grounds. In addition to the State House, the Capitol Complex includes multiple state office buildings and other facilities that actually house all 3 branches of state government. So addressing the threats to elected officials and disputes against state agencies while maintaining a productive level of public engagement actually requires a fairly unique skill set, specialized training, and access to relevant intelligence. This is particularly challenging for the Capitol Police in an environment across the nation with increased rhetoric and honestly at times more brazen assaults on public gatherings. Next slide, please. Also under that Protective Services Bureau is the Executive Protection Unit. So pursuant to KSA 75-2105, the Highway Patrol operates Executive Protection Unit that provides security for the governor and other public officials as assigned. That unit coordinates intelligence that's received and maintains the capability to mitigate and respond to potential threats at places like Cedar Crest, the governor's office in the State House, and provides security for the governor while traveling. Next slide. The last unit under that Protective Services Bureau is the Homeland Security or Emergency Operations Unit. The Homeland Security Office is the state administrative agency for federal Homeland Security funding that is provided as aid to locals. So these grants assist state, local, tribal, and territorial efforts in preventing, protecting against, mitigating, and responding to acts of terrorism or other threats. Troopers from the Homeland Security Office are also assigned to the Kansas Intelligence Fusion Center, which often provides those threat assessments that really support a variety of units within the protective services. And the Homeland Security has a presence on the State Emergency Operations, in the State Emergency Operations Center during periods of emergency and disaster. Homeland Security Office also includes a field mobile force unit that draws on troopers from other units to rapidly deploy a force, trained in techniques to restore civil order and public safety in situations that require it as directed. Next slide, please. So that we kind of covered a new piece with the Protective Services Bureau. We're going to talk a little bit about the Investigative Operations Bureau. As part of that reorganization, the Investigative Operations Bureau was established to consolidate certain investigative functions. Some of these were existing, such as the Troop V, VIN inspection, and Troop N, criminal interdiction and drug enforcement. But this also resulted in a newly created Troop O, felony investigation unit. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about Troop O and its function. Troop O specializes in enforcement activities targeting criminals that use Kansas roadways for criminal activities such as drug trafficking, human trafficking, and violent crime. This unit manages the collection and storage of evidence and administers the forfeiture of criminal proceeds adjudicated through state and federal courts. And certain staff from this unit are also assigned to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency Task Force and the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. Next slide, please. Troop O, as I mentioned, was a newly created unit. It was created to investigate certain felony cases that are initiated by the Kansas Highway Patrol. So troopers from this unit are stationed at field troops statewide and specialize in conducting investigation. The unit effectively serves as a detective service for the Kansas Highway Patrol, where specialized investigators conduct the interviews, they compile evidence, coordinate for forensic evidence testing, and prepare a prosecution packet for submission to a district attorney or a county attorney. This actually allows for the road trooper who may have initiated the incident, allows them to return to law enforcement while an experienced investigator sees the case to completion. Troop O also includes the Critical Highway Accident Response Team, or CHART, which is composed of highly trained officers specializing in crash reconstruction. These officers investigate fatal collisions, which often involve motor carriers, which are large vehicles on the road with a great deal of momentum. And they specialize in reconstructing those scenes and determining the cause. Next slide. Under that investigative bureau, we also have Troop V. So pursuant to KSA 8-116, Troop V is the VIN inspection program, addresses auto theft by inspecting vehicles purchased outside of Kansas and clearing them to receive a Kansas title and registration. Troopers and civilian inspectors conduct their work from inspection sites located throughout the state. Ultimately, their work increases the recovery of stolen vehicles and component parts and detects and prevents title fraud. Additionally, the unit trains other Kansas law enforcement agencies in auto theft investigation and vehicle inspection processes that can be conducted locally. Just for reference, in FY 2024, that unit conducted over 161,000 inspections and recovered 205 stolen vehicles. So it's a busy unit. Moving on to the next slide, please. We'll talk briefly about the administrative services. So this is kind of the final major component of that reorganization that I want to highlight. And that involved the Administrative Services Bureau. Previously, functions such as finance, human services, and IT fell under the command of a sworn officer. Because these functions related more to business operations rather than law enforcement practices, the organization placed these aspects under the supervision of a civilian deputy secretary for business operations. That person generally has knowledge on fiscal matters, contracting, and personnel issues. Further, as part of that administrative services reorganization, the position of executive officer was added to secure resources, and those resources may include federal or private funding opportunities. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, one more slide. One more. Kind of blew through those. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about the reorganization. Now I just want to shift to some recent successes for the Highway Patrol. So in addition to the reorganization, a couple other highlights include a memorandum of agreement in 2024. Members of the Executive Command and representatives from the Kansas State Troopers Association negotiated a new memorandum of understanding in 28 days. It's my understanding in previous years that can sometimes take 3 to 4 months. So completing in 28 days was considered a great success for us. The MOA defined several personnel matters, including compensation, employee rights, and work requirements. Updates to this current memorandum of understanding included scheduling matters, overtime pay improvements, shift differential, and expanded residency requirements. Under table of penalties, in light of adverse personnel actions that have occurred at Highway Patrol over the years, the Highway Patrol updated its disciplinary policy to include a table of penalties that clarifies the type of penalties that may result from an act of misconduct. So the change generally provides clarity to all parties and enhances the consistent application of discipline. Looking at trooper recruitment, hiring practices and recruitment efforts were improved at the Highway Patrol to attract qualified applicants. A condensed academy course is now offered to out-of-state law enforcement officers, and a new aptitude test was implemented. Background investigations now involve a third-party platform that allows KHP to easily exchange applicant employment history in a secure manner. The other item, just one more item I want to address on there, salary adjustments. The Kansas Highway Patrol appreciates the salary adjustments that were provided by the 2024 legislature. Those adjustments address career plan pay compaction for sworn officers and provided incentives for dispatchers. The career progression plan was adjusted to decrease the time required for sworn officers to reach the maximum step in their pay grade. A trooper will now reach compensation at 16 years of service rather than 21. After 6 months of implementation in FY 2025, we are seeing positive trends with these adjustments. We are seeing an increase of 7 sworn officers and an increase of 8 dispatchers when we compare the numbers to at this point last year. So the Highway Patrol greatly appreciates those salary adjustments that were provided. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about agency staffing. So as of January 13th, 2025, the Kansas Highway Patrol employed a total of 781 individuals. That includes 466 sworn officers And those sworn officers are composed of 427 troopers. So that is troopers that include all the way from trooper trainees to the colonel, 427. We have 33 law enforcement officers in the Capitol Police. And we have 6 law enforcement officers in the motor carrier inspection program. So those law enforcement officers supervise scale houses and enforce weight compliance requirements for motor carrier vehicles. So at 466 officers, we are down 67 positions, or 13% below our target of 533 sworn officers. This is fairly consistent with some numbers in recent years, though it is a concern for the agency. And we strive to address that through our recruiting efforts, and we hope that some of the salary adjustments can help mitigate that by retention. We also have 19 uniformed members that serve in the Capitol Area Guards. So these individuals are not sworn officers, but they do provide security and monitoring services for agencies in the Capitol complex that request such services. So you might recognize these individuals if you walked into the Landon State Office Building or the Eisenhower State Office Building. You would see the Capitol Area Guards manning the security desk at the front. KHP has 296 civilian staff positions that range from administrative assistant to a criminal justice information system auditor. We currently have 32 vacant civilian positions, and just would note some of the most difficult positions to fill that involve civilians are those dispatchers. That's a very demanding job, providing some 24-hour operations from our dispatch center in Salina. Some of the VIN inspector positions are difficult to fill, and our civilian motor carrier inspectors. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of our trooper trainee classes. You can see some of these classes, class 68, 69, 70. Those were completed in 2024. KHP graduated 29 individuals in 2023 and 27 individuals in 2024. So this graduation is where we get new troopers. There's really no other way to get new troopers. This is our main recruiting program. This is our main training program to add troopers to the State Highway Patrol. So some recent strategies to aid in recruiting in 2023. The application process was streamlined. We implemented a condensed training academy, so rather than going the full complement of 24 weeks, that condensed academy is 13 weeks for trooper recruits that have 3 years of previous law enforcement experience. So they may have gone through the KLETC, they are a practicing law enforcement officer. We allow them to go through a condensed academy within the Highway Patrol to become a state trooper. And we've also assigned adjunct recruiters in the field, so our recruiters working in the communities. In 2024, out-of-state recruitment was opened and marketing campaigns were launched in several surrounding states. And we also had implemented a policy of once a final offer of employment is confirmed, the applicant may begin work at the Highway Patrol in a civilian role. So they may work for a short period as a VIN inspector while they're waiting for their recruit class to start. So we conduct 2 classes a year. It may be a while before their class starts, so we want to make sure we hold on to them at the Highway Patrol. So we use them in other purposes until that class can begin. Just as a reminder, applicants have several steps they have to achieve to become a state trooper. They have to pass an online exam concerning basic comprehension. They go through a polygraph, background investigation, a physical agility test, and a psychological test before any offer of employment can be issued. So just as some notes, that's a long process, but it is significant because state troopers have a critical role. And some of the trends that we noticed during the recruitment process is a significant number of recruits are lost early in the application due to failure to complete or pass that online aptitude test. A significant number fail the polygraph test, which means they may have exhibited signs of deception, or more likely they disclosed disqualifying information during the polygraph. And many actually withdraw prior to initiation of the background investigation. So as of note, in 2023, there were 29 graduates from a pool of 378 applicants. So that's an 8% completion rate. Because the pipeline losses are a result of disqualifying factors rather than performance in the training program, really that tells KHP we've just got to really maintain a very large pool of applicants in order to get those that meet all the requirements. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the local law enforcement assistance. The Highway Patrol provides various services to assist our local law enforcement agencies. And I actually circulated a handout. We did some analysis and looked at the services that we provide and the instances in which we provide them. So you'll see a memo from the Highway Patrol that outlines some of those services. And it would look, it looks like this. And I just want to touch on that very quickly. So we provide a variety of specialized services in support of local law enforcement and agencies. That's in addition to the routine traffic and traffic and highway enforcement services that we provide. So by specializing in these services, the state troopers maintain a high degree of technical proficiency and operate unique equipment. So some of those, as an example, in FY 2023, the Troop T Air Support Unit assisted 101 local law enforcement agencies with aviation services that support manhunts, patrols, vehicle pursuits, missing person searches, and surveillance. I would note the Highway Patrol is the only law enforcement agency in the state of Kansas that has aircraft capabilities. So your large metropolitan police departments or sheriffs in Sedgwick or in Topeka no longer maintain any aircraft. We provide those aircraft services for those communities. And it's really quite critical and actually can save a lot of labor and time and energy using those aircraft for these services can help relieve some of the exhaustion on the local law enforcement agencies. In FY 2023, Troop O, the Critical Highway Accident Response Team, or CHART, assisted local law enforcement agencies on 29 instances with services that included crash investigations, forensic mapping, drone imaging, and airbag control module downloads. A couple other items I want to hit on there is our K9 units. In FY 2023, the Troop S Hazardous Device Unit provided K9 detection services at 67 venues. So those services, they might include preventive explosive sweeps, bomb threats, or protective sweeps. And our K9 unit provided services to local law enforcement agencies on 30 instances for evidence searches, perimeter searches, area searches, building searches. So you can see there's a variety of services that we provide to local law enforcement agencies. Training for these specialized positions, such as a pilot, K9 handler, or bomb technician, are lengthy and may exceed the resources of local law enforcement agencies. By partnering with local entities, the Highway Patrol can provide these services statewide. We're actually able to provide them at a rate that maintains suitable levels of proficiency for the Highway Patrol. So just want to describe some of the services that we provide for local law enforcement agencies. Next slide, please. Going to hit on some of the legislative initiatives we're looking forward to for this session. KHP plans to request legislation on 2 initiatives that would address matters of traffic safety. Number 1 is amending the definition of reckless driving. In recent years, KHP has observed an increase in excessive speeding. To mitigate this, the Highway Patrol will seek legislation that amends the definition of reckless driving to clarify that when a driver travels 100 miles per hour or more, or when a driver travels 35 miles per hour over the posted speed limit, they have committed reckless driving. This change would not alter the existing penalties of that statute for reckless driving, but would simply clarify exactly when a driver's speed constitutes reckless driving. Another initiative that we're looking at is the ignition interlock device manufacturer fee. KHP will seek legislation that would amend statutes to require manufacturers of the IIDs to pay fees for costs associated with administering the program. So just as a reminder, the interlock device ignition interlock device program involves the installation of breathalyzers in vehicles to prevent individuals from driving under the influence. Administering the program incurs significant expenses for maintenance of devices, inspections, and overseeing customer compliance. The fee to manufacturers of those devices would generate revenue to offset the use of appropriated state funds for this program. Next slide. Mr. Chairman, that covers some of our recent operations and some of our legislative initiatives. So I would stand for questions if permitted.
Any questions? Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, Merle. Good to see you. So could you just remind me what the age and education requirements are for troopers to apply?
So I believe the minimum age is 25 years. 21 years in which one can be eligible. So it must be 21 years of age and meet certain physical requirements. And those are, I believe, the only statutory requirements to enter the training academy. And then we, the Highway Patrol, defines some additional, they have to pass the aptitude test, they have to pass a background investigation, and they have to meet certain physical conditions in order to enter the academy.
Do they not need to have a high school diploma or GED? GED, thank you.
Yes,
thank you very much.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Merle, did you change hats on us?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Thank you. I'm curious as to how there's a new turnpike going in the Johnson County area. How is that going to impact staffing? Will that be under what's considered Troop G?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, ma'am, actually, I think our Lieutenant Colonel, who was previously with Troop G, the Turnpike, can best answer that question. If permitting, Mr. Chairman, could I have him come up?
He's welcome in here anytime.
The chairman might be able to answer this even better than me, as he sits on the KTA Authority Board, but I would say, so the Turnpike is not going to patrol that area. That area is only going to be tolled by the Kansas Turnpike. So even, and you may correct me since I've left there a year ago, but even maintenance is going to be provided by KDOT. It's only going to be tolled by the Kansas Turnpike.
So just to be clear, it will be local law enforcement? Yes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the clarification for who's going to provide law enforcement services for that expanded area of U.S. Highway 69, which a significant portion of that is in the Senate district I represent. So we're going to then be relying on our local law enforcement, it sounds like, to maintain safety and enforce the speed limits and other traffic laws there. Is that right? It's going to be local law enforcement?
None of that is scheduled to change at all. The only change will be those extra tolled lanes in the center part of it.
Right, I understand physically how it's going to change, but the enforcement will stay the same with local.
No change in any of the patrolling. As you know, the Highway Patrol does have troopers there in the Johnson County and Wyandotte County area that still patrol as they did before. If they run up on an accident or a crash or witness any kind of violations, they'll still enforce that stuff. But the responsibilities of, for instance, working collisions or any investigations that occur on that will still rely on the local jurisdiction that it always has.
Great, thank you. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, one more question. Following an earlier question regarding requirements and qualifications to apply to the academy, is it a requirement to be a U.S. citizen?
Yes. Yes.
It is. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you seeing anything in particular on the turnpike, on the highways, that should be of note in terms of interdiction or drugs or anything in particular that's kind of noteworthy? Any trends, anything going upwards, or anything that the committee should be aware of from that perspective?
I'm going to have the Lieutenant Colonel might answer that better, who has better knowledge on that.
I would say nothing changed over the years. I mean, similar, we do have as Merle mentioned, we still have our interdiction teams that still are out along all the interstate thoroughfares throughout the state of Kansas, but nothing that's really significantly changed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Senator, we'll try and get the Turnpike in here for a presentation also. Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. You mentioned 3 areas, civilian areas. One was dispatchers were difficult to fill. Did they get a pay increase too in those areas?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Senator, they did. Last year, the 2024 legislature approved a 10% increase for dispatchers. So that was for 2025. So we implemented, we're about 6 months into that. We are seeing an increase in the dispatchers we're able to hire, which is, I think, of 8 positions. So that is one of the positions that's difficult to hire. I think that's difficult for many law enforcement agencies to hire just because that's a very demanding position. We have some additional resources to address that now.
And to follow up, Mr. Chairman, what were the other 2 areas you mentioned?
I believe they were VIN inspectors and VIN inspectors and civilian motor carrier inspectors are often difficult positions to fill.
And then maybe one short follow-up. So at any given time, and I don't know if you can answer this or not now, but like during session on site, you have here 33 Capitol Police officers. Like at any given time during session, how many officers are here in the Capitol? Or can we answer that now?
I don't know. The Colonel may be able to answer that.
Just for safety and security reasons, it'd probably be a side conversation that we'd probably want to visit with about that, just so we don't disclose exactly.
I thought that, but okay.
Merle, do you know what the average size of law enforcement is in our communities?
So I think there are some, if I remember right, over 4,000 law enforcement agencies in Kansas, including a variety of municipal police departments, county. And I don't know the average size, but I do know that many of them in the rural communities often operate with, I think, 4 officers or less. But I can try to find that information as what is the average size of a law enforcement agency in Kansas.
That's fine. I just wanted to highlight how small some of our local community law enforcement groups are and how important it is to have the high-risk warrant searches and some of the services that provide that higher patrolman may be the backup for that guy, the only backup for the person that's serving in the middle of the night.
Yeah, the Highway Patrol often provides support for both the routine traffic and highway law enforcement operations for local law enforcement agencies in their communities. And then, as I mentioned, we provide a variety of those really specialized services. So a thing like a canine handler or an aircraft pilot, those are functions that an agency of 4 officers cannot replicate. They cannot provide that service. They just don't have the staffing to be able to have someone be gone for long periods to receive that intensive training, and they may not have the resources to maintain the equipment. So for a hazardous devices unit, for bomb teams, these are resources that the Highway Patrol can provide in support of those locals. And when we do it as a state agency, we can provide those services at a frequency which keeps our personnel well proficient and skilled and trained on those skills, and which means that the local law enforcement agency doesn't need to expend their resources on some of those unique aspects.
Thank you. Senator Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to express appreciation for the level of professionalism, working with our local counties, agencies, and the collaboration and the safety guardrails that all of you provide for our state. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will relay that to the Colonel and to the agency.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Merle. Committee, just to know, just some sidelines, we do need to get out of the room by 25 after each day. We have FI&I that follows us. Senator Dietrich was be appreciative of that, for her staff to be able to reset up the rooms. But with that, I do intend to have some presentations here. Tomorrow, we are not meeting. We will meet on Thursday. Probably try and have a couple of presentations next week, and we'll start bill hearings later next week. With that, no further business to come before us. We're adjourned.